So Rob Simmers, our Director of Professional Services, let's talk about the future of automation. What is automation when it comes to IT?
So I think this is a very fun topic, Rich. I'm a fan of automation, if you haven't heard. So automation is actually a very broad term. It's going to vary a lot by industry. There are lots of things people are trying to accomplish with automation, but think about it from a standpoint of what we're trying to do as far as automation is concerned is really minimize human input and interaction. We're trying to take us out of the equation. From an IT perspective, that could be like process automation. We're like taking logical steps, things that we know, that we do over and over again, and try to do those quickly and efficiently. We might take infrastructure where we're trying to create virtual machines on the fly. We want to create a bunch of them all the same way, or give someone some options and then help them stand up a VM really fast for testing. There are trigger and event automations. Those are the kind of things where we've had, from ITSM perspective at least, we'll take something like that and we take a ticket, and when something happens in a ticket, we want to generate a ticket in another system, or send an email notification. All those things could be considered, types of automation from an IT perspective. Then you get into some of the more fun stuff that we're seeing come into the market. You see robotic process automation, RPA, a lot. And really that's kind of a cheating type of automation where you're kind of walking through form elements and stuff like that and filling in the blank. Just like you would click through your email and do something, you can teach these bots to basically walk through and do that for you. But even look into like manufacturing or something like that. There's all these robots that are out now that we see building cars, and they're building cars the same way. So we're getting quality assurance, and lean philosophies and principles are applied. So things are happening in a very certain way, and it just really streamlines everything. Or you have a vacuum that's automatically cleaning your house at a certain time. So there's just tons of ways that automation are kind of taking over in the world today. But even when I was doing identity and access management, just as an example, we would take onboarding processes that took days or weeks, and we would automate that to under 10 minutes. So it's very, very powerful, and can be super powerful in certain verticals.
And my next question was, what are some of the things we would expect to see automation take control of? I think you pretty much answered that question already for us, the majority of it.
Well, I don't know. Have you seen Terminator? That's coming, right?
It's on its way.
You're looking at repeatable processes, right? Monotonous processes that we're doing over and over again. And the question typically is there a logical path to complete something, right? Can you tell me, step by step how to do things and define a logical way of doing it? So yeah, that does kind of answer in the previous question, but one of the things you see a lot of is just data entry, right? Copying and pasting stuff from tickets and emails into business systems. So you're going to see all that stuff start to vanish from the industry. And us as people, when we're interfacing with computers, we're traditionally looking at like graphical user interfaces, right? Buttons and places to type, and it's actually inefficient, right? So when we look at what we can expect going forward, it's really software talking to software. It's going to be fast, efficient, consistent, and we're even documenting processes in a way too, because if I ask you how you do something and how I do something, even though we're doing the same process, so to speak, we'll have completely different ways and different things and different documents that we're probably looking at. So when you automate something, you have something you can look at, a workflow or code or something that tells you exactly step by step how you're accomplishing that end goal.
Next question, how will automation affect coding? And this is pretty important.
Yeah, so coding, that's definitely some interesting stuff going on there. So no matter what you're seeing from an automation perspective, you're still in the end, it's going down to ones and zeros from an IT perspective. So if you look at like even software today, it's kind of like an onion. It's like layers of software. So, you may have something like a programming language like C at the very base of it. And that's when you're like actually having the operating system talk to hardware. And then they create a wrapper for that to make things efficient. So you're calling the same stuff. And then from like a Windows perspective, you have .NET framework. That's another wrapper that basically gives you more shortcuts. Then you have PowerShell that's on top of that gives you even more shortcuts that makes it easier for administrators and people to write the code. And then, you may have a GUI on top of that that's calling PowerShell commands, that calls .NET commands, that calls C commands, So it's this big onion of layers of things, right? So basically, the closer to the hardware you get, the more code there is. So even in application development today, you're rarely going to see someone develop something from scratch to do something. They're going to use pre-written pieces of software that are going to expedite that product delivery. So, as far as trends are concerned, you're going to see low code and no code. So with low code, it's a little more lenient, but you're still it's a heavily GUI driven interface where you're trying to just basically connect the dots with some ability to basically perform automation. But you're going to still need strong integrations, right? Things, you're going to have to look at it from your company's perspective. Like, do they have integrations with the software that I use? And then no code is even more strict. I mean, you get into what is the WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. And it's like drag and the drop, fill in the blanks. So, I mean, some of the problems with that are, devs, are still going to have to do everything. So if there's an error, an integration you need, if there's some limitation in that software, there's no way to get around it without having the company, fix that as a feature enhancement or in a future update. And then, the pros might be that you can build automation with less skills required. But there's obviously lots of pros and cons you can go down with that approach, if that makes sense.
It does. And then that is going to lead us into how is all this going to affect all the applications? What effect is it going to have?
So I think from an application perspective, businesses are becoming more, automation savvy, right? They're going to look for opportunities to do automation. And so products need to really have automation in mind when they're building that product. So, a product can be offered with like workflow options inside of it, or, they just need to have a very strong external API so that you can interface with that piece of software. I mean, it's kind of funny because like Microsoft went through this a couple years ago, and this is kind of some geeky stuff, but, Unix had Bash, and you could pretty much do anything in it. You could like self-delete the operating system if you want to do it in Unix. And Microsoft, was trying to use scripting languages and all those things, and they just had lots of handcuffs and like things that you couldn't do. So they completely like started rethinking a lot of this stuff, and that's kind of where PowerShell was derived from. And they basically gave you access to .NET. When we talked a minute ago, .NET gets you access to the C, which gets you closer to that stack of things. So when DevOps became really big, Microsoft had to push even more for a lot of this type of stuff. But you see it's come very far at this point, and like every time there's a new PowerShell version, there's more and more stuff that you can do that makes things easier and easier. And at this point, like even if you're interfacing with a Microsoft end application like Exchange or something like that, it's actually running PowerShell in the background. And so if you can do that, that just really opens up the doors to automate whatever you want. But in the end, I think the general rule of thumb is that, from what applications can do, you need to be able to do more from your automation and your backend APIs than you're able to do inside of a GUI interface, or you're kind of behind the curve.
What roles will AI and machine learning play in automation? That's an important question.
Yeah, so, AI and machine learning are the current buzzwords. It was DevOps a couple of years ago. so most software has to have some kind of implementation of AI or machine learning, or they're kind of behind the curve, minimally from a marketing perspective, right? So, what is AI and machine learning? It's really about machines making human-like decisions. They're performing tasks without explicitly telling it what to do. And that's very exciting, but it's also very scary, because we do go back to the kind of Terminator thing. Luckily, I think we are very far away from true AI and stuff like that. But you see that in the world today a lot. Now, I don't know if you've been watching the TikTok or Instagrams or all those, but you see the deep fakes, of pictures of where you're just overlaying someone's face onto something else.
Yes, I've been watching that.
Right. And so that stuff is very cool, but it's also very scary, right? Can you believe what you're seeing, right? But that's where one of the ways that AI is basically, interacting today, and it's able to track all the points on someone's face and be able to overlay seamlessly, so that it's hard for the human eye to detect. From another IT perspective, you might have a hacker that's leveraging an AI to look for security holes, right? They're gonna teach this machine to basically go out and try to find ways in. And then on the other side, you have businesses that are trying to use AIs to look for suspicious activity and automatically block it, so that even if the other AI finds it, your AI fixes it and stops it from happening. So, it's kind of that war is going to be going on between the AIs. So that's kind of a high level overview of the machine learning and AI in today. So,
well, how will automation affect cost, both short term and long term? And I think that's what most folks are worried about when they're making these decisions.
So, the one thing I can say that's great about automation is there's always a return on investment. I haven't yet to see one where there's not. So there's just lots of variables that kind of go into how much return on investment you're going to actually see. And that's kind of basically the complexity and volume of what you're doing. So if, and I go back to just the onboarding processes, if you're onboarding tens of thousands of people and have high attrition or something like that, it's easier to show that return on value, because you're just going to basically take something and say, it takes someone 3 days to do this. I can do it in 10 minutes, so your return on investment is this. But I think that, going even long term into things, I think that automation needs care and feeding, right? You need to continually kind of innovate, and you're going to have different tools and stuff to move forward. So in order for you to have the best long-term stuff, is really you're going to continue to add automation and things. But I think that you're going to see just tons of return when it comes to any kind of automation initiatives. And the good thing is you're going to see them short-term, but they're going to get better and better the more math you do to do a long-term return on investment.
So will automation eliminate positions in IT, or actually create new ones? That's some concern for some folks that are in the lower level areas of IT.
Right. So, it's actually one of the common things we see. It's obviously a bit of a sensitive subject, as it's one of the common issues with even adoption of automation inside of companies, because of that exact fact. So normally when we're looking at automation initiatives, the goal is to give time back, right? You're sitting there, working tickets or something like that, doing day-to-day firefighting, the grind, right? And the goal is really to take that off your plate, so that you can focus on new products and strategy, inside of the organization. I mean, as an IT person, you want to play with the newest tools and look at the cutting edge trends and stuff like that. You don't want to be clicking through Active Directory, disabling accounts or something like that. So that's truly what we're trying to accomplish most of the time, is just to try to give time back to the IT departments and to the business in general, so that they have time to do the things that are most important. But there are positions like data entry, as I said before, where someone's just copying and pasting data. Going in the future, it's going to be rare to see those, because that's becoming easier and easier to automate that type of thing. So you're going to see roles that are going to evolve, and you're going to have to help understand and help mature automation versus just doing something like a copy and paste operations. So, like I said, another misnomer is really that, once you've automated something, it's done, right? It doesn't really work like that. Business processes change, business systems change, tools get better. So automation is evolution, and that needs care and feeding, and that's one of the considerations. So you're always going to need people to help drive